The winter wind cut across my cheeks as I stood outside the grand glass doors of the ballroom, my fingers tightening around the small gift bag I had brought. Inside, the music swelled, laughter spilling into the hallway every time someone entered. I had been invited, or at least I thought I had until she appeared. The CEO's fiancée, dressed in a gown that shimmered like ice, her lips curved in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She stepped in front of me, her perfume sharp, her words sharper. "You don't belong here," she said, tilting her head as if assessing an intruder. I froze, my heart pounding, my invitation suddenly feeling like a worthless piece of paper in my clutch. People nearby slowed their steps, pretending not to listen, though their eyes betrayed their curiosity. My throat tightened as I tried to explain, but she raised a manicured hand, silencing me with the kind of authority only someone sure of their position could wield. Behind her, the chandelier's light caught on every polished surface, mocking the fact that I was still standing outside in the cold while the celebration carried on without me. I felt the sting of humiliation settle in my chest, each second stretching endlessly as she stood there, blocking my way, waiting for me to step back. I swallowed hard, the gift bag suddenly feeling heavier in my hand, as if it contained every ounce of dignity I had left. Her gaze traveled from my shoes to my face, pausing just long enough to make me feel small. The hallway behind me seemed to grow quieter, the muted hum of the party only amplifying the icy silence between us. I could see my reflection in the glass, shoulders slightly hunched, hair tousled from the wind, and hated how powerless I looked. "I was invited," I managed to say, my voice softer than I intended. Her smirk deepened, as if my words confirmed something she already believed. She leaned closer, her whisper slicing through me. "Not by me." That was the moment I realized this wasn't about a guest list, it was about control. She wanted me to feel like an outsider, to remind me that this world wasn't mine. For a split second, I considered turning around, walking away, sparing myself the scene. But my feet refused to move. My pulse roared in my ears, a mix of embarrassment and stubborn defiance. Somewhere inside that glittering ballroom, he was waiting. And whether she liked it or not, I wasn't ready to leave. Before I could gather enough courage to respond to her, the ballroom doors behind her swung open, flooding the hallway with golden light and the hum of music and laughter. Standing there, framed by the glow, was the CEO himself, tall, immaculate, but with a frown that cut through the polished perfection of the event. His gaze swept over the hallway until it locked on me, lingering in a way that made my breath catch. In that moment, it was as if the crowd and music behind him faded into a distant blur. I noticed the subtle tightening of his jaw, the way his hand curled at his side before he took a step forward. He passed her without so much as a glance, the soft rustle of his suit brushing against her dress, making her shift uncomfortably. People inside began to notice, heads turning toward the scene in the doorway. He stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint crease between his brows and catch the low, measured tone of his voice when he asked, "Why are you standing out here?" I hesitated, my words trapped somewhere between my throat and my pride. I wanted to tell him everything, but I also wanted her to feel the weight of the silence. Then he turned toward her, his expression unyielding. "If she's not going in," he said firmly, "then I'm not going in either." A collective gasp rippled from the people watching, whispers already starting. My heart pounded, not just from the shock of his words, but from the way he extended his hand toward me, steady, deliberate, as if inviting me into a place I had been told I didn't belong. The air in the hallway thickened, the distant laughter from inside, now sounding like a reminder of the world I had just been denied. His hand was still there, open, waiting, as if time itself had slowed down to watch what I would do. Her face twisted, a mixture of disbelief and barely restrained panic. "You can't be serious," she whispered to him, but her voice carried enough for those nearby to hear. The guests hovering at the doorway exchanged curious glances, some pretending to sip their champagne while clearly straining to catch every word. He didn't answer her. Instead, his eyes stayed locked on mine, steady, unblinking, almost challenging me to trust him. I felt the sting of humiliation in my chest, the echo of her refusal still fresh. But there was something in his gaze that cut through the embarrassment, replacing it with a strange, fragile warmth. Slowly, I placed my hand in his, and the murmur of the onlookers swelled. His grip was firm, grounding, like he was anchoring me back to a version of myself I thought I had lost the moment she turned me away. Without another word, he led me toward the entrance, his steps unhurried but deliberate, forcing everyone in our path to make room. She stood frozen behind us, her fingers curled into her sequined clutch, lips pressed into a thin, furious line. Every click of my heels on the marble floor felt like a small act of defiance, the weight of the moment pressing against my ribs, yet lifting me all at once. Whatever lay beyond those doors, I knew I wasn't walking in as the same person who had been told she wasn't welcome. As we crossed the threshold, the grand ballroom unfolded before me. Crystal chandeliers scattering light like frozen fireworks, the hum of music intertwining with hushed gossip. Every pair of eyes seemed to follow us, conversations dipping into silence for just long enough to feed the rumors that were already blooming in the corners of the room. I could feel the judgment hanging in the air, a heavy mix of curiosity and quiet condemnation. His hand never left mine, guiding me through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged entirely to this world, and was making it very clear that I did too. My dress, simple compared to the glittering gowns around us, suddenly didn't feel like a mark of not belonging. It felt intentional, almost like a statement against the opulence that had tried to shut me out moments ago. He stopped near the center of the room, close enough to the towering cake and the orchestra stage, and turned to face me fully. For a heartbeat, it was as if we were alone, the noise fading under the weight of the choice he had just made, walking away from his own fiancée to take my side. I saw a flicker of something in his expression, a shadow that hinted this wasn't just about tonight. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but before he could, she entered the room. The click of her heels was sharp, each step slicing through the music until the violinist faltered. Her eyes locked on him first, then slid to me, blazing with the kind of fury that didn't care about witnesses. The tension snapped taut, and I realized this night was about to unravel in ways none of us could take back. Her voice cut through the air before she even reached us, pitched high enough to turn every head. "So this is why you didn't answer my calls," she spat, her gown sweeping the floor like a warning. The guests exchanged glances, their polite smiles stretching thinner by the second, eager for the drama they could later dissect over champagne. He didn't flinch. Instead, he stepped slightly in front of me, not to shield me from her, but to make it unmistakable to everyone in the room that I wasn't going anywhere. She stopped just a breath away, her perfume mingling with the sharpness of her anger, eyes darting from him to me as if trying to decide where to strike first. I felt the weight of 100 unspoken accusations pressing in, but before I could even form words, he spoke. "If she doesn't come in, I'm not staying," his voice rang out, steady and deliberate, carrying across the marble walls like a vow. A ripple went through the crowd, gasps, murmurs, a stifled laugh from somewhere in the back. Her lips trembled, parting as if to argue, but no sound came. For the first time, she seemed aware of the audience, of the eyes that were no longer looking at her with admiration, but with something colder, sharper. I could almost hear the shift in the room, the unspoken verdict that she had lost the one thing she thought she controlled. The orchestra hesitated, then resumed playing, but the melody sounded different now, heavier. He turned to me, the faintest smile breaking through his resolve, and in that moment, I understood that whatever came next, the balance between us had already changed. The moment, he turned his back on her and started walking toward the exit. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Every step echoed against the polished floor, the sound sharp and deliberate, as if he was carving a line no one could cross. I followed, my heels clicking in sync with his, though my hands trembled slightly from the surge of adrenaline. Behind us, whispers rose like a tide, some in disbelief, others tinged with satisfaction, as if they'd been waiting for this scene to unfold. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel her stare burning into my spine, the kind of gaze meant to pin you in place. The grand double doors loomed ahead, the gold handles gleaming under the chandelier's light. He pushed them open with a force that made the hinges groan, and suddenly we were out in the crisp night air, the muffled hum of the party fading behind us. Streetlights bathed the pavement in a pale glow, and for a moment neither of us spoke. My chest rose and fell quickly, as though I'd been running, though all I'd done was walk away. Finally, he broke the silence. "I told you before, I'm not letting them treat you like that." His tone wasn't loud, but there was a weight to it, an anchor that made the world feel a little steadier. I searched his face for hesitation, for any trace of regret, but found only certainty. In that quiet, I realized he hadn't just left the party, he'd chosen a side, and for the first time, I believed it might actually be mine. We stood there for a long moment, the cool night air wrapping around us like a fragile shield against the noise inside. I could still hear faint music drifting from the hall, but it felt like it belonged to another world, one we had both just decided to abandon. He slipped off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders without asking, the warmth still lingering from his body. My fingers brushed the fabric, and I realized they were still trembling, not from the cold, but from the weight of what had just happened. "You didn't have to do that," I murmured, my voice quieter than I intended. His eyes locked on mine, unwavering. "I did. You think I can stand in there and pretend everything's fine while they shut you out?" There was a sharp edge beneath his calm tone, a rare crack in the perfect composure he always wore. I'd seen him negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking, but this was personal. He stepped closer, his presence both intimidating and oddly comforting. "I'm not marrying someone who thinks she can decide who's worthy to be in my life," he said, each word deliberate. My chest tightened, not just from his defense, but from the realization that he meant every syllable. Somewhere inside, the fear I'd been carrying began to loosen, replaced by something far more dangerous, hope. I glanced toward the glowing windows of the hall, silhouettes moving behind them, and knew the story inside had already shifted. They wouldn't see me as an outsider after tonight. Not anymore. And maybe neither would I. Before I could answer, he reached for my hand, not gently, but firmly, as if anchoring me in place. The sudden contact sent a rush of heat through me, and for a moment I forgot about the music, the stares, the whispers that must already be brewing inside. "Come with me," he said, his voice low but commanding. I hesitated, glancing toward the tall glass doors, imagining the looks we'd get if we walked back in together. "They'll talk," I whispered. His lips curved into the faintest smirk. "Let them. They should know exactly where I stand." With that, he pushed the doors open, pulling me into the light. The room fell into a hush so sharp I could hear the faint clink of a glass being set down. His fiancée stood near the center, her smile frozen mid-sentence as her eyes darted between us. He didn't let go of my hand, didn't slow down. Every step we took together felt like a statement written in bold ink across the pristine floor. When we stopped in front of her, he spoke with an ease that felt like a blade. "If she's not welcome, then neither am I." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and for the first time all night, her perfectly arranged expression faltered. The music resumed faintly, but it no longer belonged to a celebration. It sounded more like a countdown. I stood there, the weight of his hand still in mine, realizing that whatever happened next would change everything. And for once, I didn't feel like the one on the outside looking in. The air felt heavier the moment his words sank in, as if the chandeliers above us had dimmed in quiet agreement. All around, eyes darted between him, his fiancée, and me, each gaze a mixture of curiosity, disbelief, and something sharper. She took a step forward, her voice trembling beneath a forced laugh. "You can't be serious," she said, trying to glance past me as though I were just an unfortunate obstacle blocking her view. But he didn't move, didn't release my hand. Instead, he turned slightly toward the crowd, his tone calm yet resolute. "I'm very serious." It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of voice people leaned in to hear. The whispers swelled instantly, fragmented phrases like, "Is that his? And why would he?" weaving through the room. My heart pounded, and not just from the attention. I could feel the subtle tension in his grip, the silent reassurance that I wasn't standing here alone. She tried again, this time with a sharper edge. "This is our night. She doesn't belong here." The words were a slap I'd been bracing for since the moment I arrived, but hearing them out loud, in front of so many, still stung. I swallowed, ready to step back, to make it easier for him. But before I could, he moved closer, so close his presence felt like a shield. "If she leaves," he said, his gaze locked on hers, "I walk out with her." The room seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the back, a champagne flute shattered against the floor, and I realized the night had just crossed a line there was no coming back from. Her face went pale, the flawless makeup failing to hide the way her jaw tightened. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes flicked to the guests, to the photographers who had frozen mid-click, unsure whether to capture the scandal or look away. She finally let out a laugh, brittle and sharp. "You're making a scene," she hissed, as though the hundreds of eyes on us hadn't already confirmed that. The murmur of voices in the room was no longer hushed. It swelled with the restless energy of people sensing a story worth remembering. I could feel my own breath catch, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment pressing against my ribs. She reached for his arm, her perfectly manicured nails curling like hooks. "We can talk about this later. Just let her go and come inside." But his arm remained at his side, unmoving. The silence between them was louder than any argument. Then, in a move that made the entire front row lean forward, he stepped past her, not toward the altar, but toward the exit doors behind me. Gasps rippled through the crowd, the kind that made people instinctively pull out their phones. I turned slightly, uncertain whether to follow or stop him from doing something reckless. But his hand found mine again, firm and steady, and the decision was made for me. As we walked toward the doors, I caught sight of her reflection in the tall glass panels, her eyes shimmering with something that wasn't just anger but fear. And for the first time that evening, I wondered if she knew she'd just lost far more than a ceremony. The heavy wooden doors swung open, letting in a rush of cool evening air that cut through the stifling tension inside. Outside, the city lights glittered against the night sky, and the distant hum of traffic felt strangely grounding after the suffocating silence of the hall. His grip on my hand never wavered as we stepped down the marble stairs, each heel click echoing like a gavel striking. Behind us, the muffled chaos began, voices overlapping, guests arguing in disbelief, the faint sound of his fiancée's shrill tone trying to regain control of the narrative. Cameras flashed through the glass, but out here, the moment belonged only to us. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, as though shaking off years of expectations in that single exhale. "I'm done pretending," he said finally, his voice low but resolute. "If walking in means leaving you out here, then I'd rather stay here forever." The sincerity in his tone was almost disarming, a stark contrast to the curated charm he wore in public. I realized then that this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about a man choosing where his loyalty truly lay, even if it meant walking away from the life everyone expected of him. The limousine driver, startled by our sudden appearance, scrambled to open the door, but he waved him off. We weren't leaving in a car. Instead, we kept walking, side by side, down the dimly lit street, as if the act of moving forward together was our quiet rebellion. Inside, the celebration they had planned was unraveling. But out here, a different story was just beginning to write itself. And for the first time that night, I wasn't afraid of how it would end. We walked until the noise of the venue faded completely, replaced by the distant hum of the city and the rhythm of our footsteps on the pavement. The street was lined with quiet cafes and warm light spilling from small shop windows, a stark contrast to the grandeur and tension we had just left behind. My mind was still catching up to what had happened, how, in front of hundreds of people, he had chosen to walk away without hesitation. I glanced at him, expecting to see regret or doubt, but his expression was calm, almost relieved. "You've been my compass from the beginning," he said softly, as if confessing something he'd been holding for years. "Tonight just made me realize I can't build my life with someone who would shut you out." His words settled over me, heavy and warm at the same time, erasing the sting of every glare and whispered insult I had endured. We stopped at a small park, the kind where couples strolled quietly and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. He sat on a bench, gesturing for me to join him, and when I did, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a folded envelope. "This," he said, pressing it into my hands, "was supposed to be for after the ceremony, but now it belongs here in this moment." The paper was thick, its seal unbroken, but I didn't need to open it to understand its weight. It wasn't just a letter, it was a promise, one that didn't require an audience or an altar to be real. My fingers hesitated over the seal, feeling the embossed initials beneath my touch. Part of me feared what I might find inside, because promises once read became real and irreversible. When I finally broke it open, the scent of his cologne drifted up from the paper, as if he had held it for hours before deciding to give it to me. The handwriting was precise yet warm, every curve of the letters deliberate. "To the only person who has ever seen me without a mask," it began. My breath caught. He wrote about the first day we met, how my honesty had startled him in a world where everyone seemed to want something from him. He recalled the way I stood my ground during the toughest board meeting, the night I brought him tea when he worked until dawn, the quiet mornings when neither of us needed to speak. "You've been my home long before I had the courage to admit it," the letter said. And then came the final line, underlined once, steady and sure. "No title, no event, no contract will ever mean more than walking beside you." I blinked back tears, the kind that came not from sadness but from being truly seen. Closing the letter, I realized the world we had left behind at the venue no longer mattered. The whispers, the stares, the accusations, they were dust compared to the clarity in his eyes. He had not only walked out for me, he had chosen me without condition. The weight I'd carried for so long, the feeling of being disposable, slipped away into the cool night air, leaving only the quiet pulse of possibility. We didn't go far, just around the corner to a quiet, tree-lined street where the city lights softened into a warm glow. The hum of the venue still lingered behind us, muffled now, like a world we had stepped out of and shut the door on. He shrugged off his jacket and placed it gently around my shoulders, his hands lingering just long enough for me to feel the unspoken promise there. "You don't need their approval," he said softly, his voice steady but carrying a weight I knew came from years of being expected to perform for others. I wanted to tell him how much that meant, but my throat tightened with the kind of emotion words can't hold without breaking. Instead, I slipped my hand into his, feeling the warmth of his palm close around mine, solid and sure. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for the moment someone would let go. We walked without rushing, the night air folding around us like a cocoon, each step away from the venue feeling like a step toward something unshakable. Somewhere behind us, the music swelled for a celebration we no longer belonged to. Yet I didn't feel left out. I felt chosen. Under the dim light of a street lamp, he stopped and looked at me in a way that made the noise, the people, the politics disappear. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together." And I believed him, not because of the words, but because he had already proven them when he turned his back on everything for me. "Would you have left too?"